Welcome to week 7, everyone. Thanks for a great week 6. Another round of some really stimulating, challenging conversations this past week. I appreciate the charity with which you all have engaged the material. Some challenging readings. I think we also face some far reaching questions, theological questions, doctrinal questions, I suppose we could say. Matters of social location, how that affects our own interpretation, what the text sounds like to us, what it communicates to us, how matters of social location are also relevant to who Jesus was and is, and how he interacted with others. So I hope you've come away with, I don't know, some new insight, I guess, into some iconic scenes in the Gospel of Matthew that have parallels, of course, in other Gospels and convey the Exodus power of Jesus, which is at once a kind of troubling power as well. It's the kind of power that has uh, raised the alarms at the highest levels of government in the land. And that is going to affect, of course, where the narrative turns in this next week that we are going to spend studying Matthew together. I hope you also came away with a sense of the importance this last week of considering voices that have often been repressed in our study of Matthew, in making sense of the gospel, what it means to be Christian. Some of the readings that I assigned were designed to just enable us to have some of our own interpretations, maybe inclinations questioned, challenged, and I'm sure some of us felt the impulse to defend Jesus, defend Matthew, defend Christianity against the way that has been abused or uh, performed badly in various parts of the world, particularly for certain kinds of people, kinds of body, and um, I just want to reiterate how crucial I think it is that our imaginations are affected, um, opened, challenged by these voices that communicate to us the harm that has been done to them, to their places, to their people by the words of the Bible. And for us to be careful about kind of our assumptions that we can perform the Bible without any of that. I think we have to own the complicated and damaging, in some ways, legacy that the scriptures have had as they have been conveyed by communities of people, and especially certain kinds of white colonial power. Um, its interpretation often dominated by men to the exclusion of female voices, testimony, experiences. And we can't continue that. We just can't. We have to change the way that we approach interpreting the Bible. And I think to do that with any hope of redemption requires us to listen carefully to voices of dissent, rebuke, denunciation, and not to rush to defend ourselves or um, what we identify with, you might say, in the Christian faith, but instead to hear with as open a mind as we can muster. I thought we did some of that together this last week, so I'm glad for that. Just want to encourage us to continue along those lines. Before I say a brief word about the passages that are coming up, let me just comment on the work that's coming your way this week. Obviously, you have submitted your initial drafts of your working papers. You've been assigned partners and for a peer review process that's going to be going on through this week. I want to just kind of go over briefly what that peer review should be doing. First of all, it's a way for us to invest in one another's work rather than just in our own. That's partly why I've made 5% of your grade on your own paper based on the quality of your review of your partner's paper. So please do take that review responsibility seriously. And as you'll see in the criteria that I've laid out for that, part of the purpose of the review is just to get another set of eyes on the paper to notice spelling mistakes, grammatical mistakes that have been made. For some of us, English or writing is just not a strength. And so it helps to have someone else look over our shoulder and just help us notice things that we haven't noticed. There are also some criteria that encourage you as the reviewer to consider what you might call the flow or the clarity of your partner's analysis. And this is really important because, as you guys are probably figuring out, when you're thinking and writing, and especially when you're thinking hard about something that is stretching you, it's hard to express yourself clearly. And that's even more difficult sometimes in writing. And so, what sometimes happens, and this happens to me in my writing too, is we get a little lost in our own heads so that what we're writing down is clearer to us because of all the things that we're kind of supplying from our own inner thoughts to the words that are on the page. But all of that is not available to the reader. And so the reader can get lost and not be able to follow the train of thought of the writer. And that's totally normal. And the purpose of this peer review is to give a fellow student the opportunity to tell you where that might have happened in your paper. So if you're the reviewer and there's some place in the paper where you're just not sure what a paragraph is about, or the flow of the paper is kind of broken down for you, not really sure how it's organized. Sometimes the student will start with a certain idea at the beginning of a paragraph and kind of get sidetracked with something in the middle of the paragraph, and then they sort of lost track of what that paragraph was about. And so it really helps for someone else to read that and say, you lost me here. Right about here, I knew what you were talking about, but then, next sentence, next few sentences here, it seems like it sort of veers off in another direction. So you can invite the student then to clean that up a little bit, clarify their train of thought at that point. So a couple of the criteria, the peer review that I've listed are um, kind of identifying, first of all, where the analysis of the paper is really strong and insightful. Maybe you've learned something as the reviewer, but also identify places where the analysis doesn't flow very well or seems to break down. Give the student an opportunity to go back and make that part of their paper stronger. So be sure to consider those criteria. The other one that I wanted to mention here is the last one, the fifth one, which is about the quality of the writer's engagement with their two commentaries and any other material, secondary material that they've drawn on for their paper. By secondary material, I mean articles that I've assigned, chapters written by me, or a podcast from me, something like that. Uh, any engagement with other writers other than Matthew, we call with secondary material. And you, as the reviewer, are asked to help the writer see if they're using that secondary material well. What does that involve? Well, I talk about this a little bit in the assignment guide, but just to reiterate it here, it's important that the voice of the paper be that of the students, the writers, from beginning to end, and not become simply a way of recording what other writers say about this or that in Matthew. And so, in order for the voice to remain that of the student, you need to sort of set up what you're going to do with a secondary writer, say a commentary, why you're introducing them into the flow of your analysis, what it's going to contribute. And then after you've quoted from the writer or mentioned what they say, then you're going to follow that up typically with some kind of comment of your own, why you agree, why you disagree, why this is really illuminating, why it actually obscures things, um, how it contributes to the development of your own interpretation. So that's important, that that kind of setting up and follow up is present in the paper wherever you're interacting with commentaries or other secondary material. So that's the peer review. You'll notice that the workload for just kind of the weekly work is a little lighter this week to give you some time to focus on the peer review as well as polishing up your own paper when you get that review back from your partner. Um, to so that's just going to be one response form. There's one response form, not two this week. So hopefully that gives you a little more margin in your week to be able to really invest in that peer review and do your best work on that working paper of your own as well. The weight of the week's work, I hope, will not keep you from investing some time in studying this segment of the narrative, going from chapter 16, verse 13, all the way through the end of chapter 20. We're really at a crucial turn, as I started to say at the beginning of this video, where Jesus is now definitely on the radar among the political authorities of the land, whether those authorities be based in Jerusalem or Herod up in the northern part where Jesus has been concentrating his own movements and activities. And so we have this scene that unfolds in Caesarea Philippi that gets us started. And just think for a minute about that location name. It's in the shadow of this area called Caesar Philip that Jesus puts this question to the disciples: who are people saying that the Son of Man is? What's the buzz about who Jesus is? And this, of course, elicits a reply from the disciples that kind of gives a sense of what Jesus's public profile is, what people are making of Jesus, despite the fact, remember, that he has not been declaring himself as being this or that figure to the masses. And then he turns this question on the disciples. It's a bit of a confrontation. Who do you say that I am? And Peter notoriously answers, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And this is the first time that any character has said this to Jesus, about Jesus. And it draws from Jesus a striking reply, uh, saying that Peter is now the rock on whom Jesus is going to build his church, which is another key term that just comes into the story right here. He is building a community in Israel that is going to be a part of the future of his people and you might say embody his power in a whole variety of ways throughout Israel and beyond. And I think it is not incidental that it is right at this point, though, that Jesus says that the disciples are not to tell other people that he's the Messiah. And moreover, that what it means for him to be the Messiah is to go to Jerusalem now and to die a shameful death at the hands of the corrupt authorities that he's been exposing already up to this point in the drama. And this does not sound like deliverance, salvation to his disciples. Doesn't sound like it to me either. It's a shocking, astonishing word that he says. And of course, Peter, in response, finds himself playing the Satan, channeling the adversary, against Jesus at the announcement that what it means for him to be the Messiah is to go to this kind of death in Jerusalem. To understand what drives Peter to do that, you've got to look back at the previous places in the narrative where the Satan has appeared and what that is about. And then Jesus not only tells Peter that he is playing the Satan to him, that he is to stand aside and to not get in his way, but doubles down and says that if you want to follow him, if you want to participate fully in the power that he is bringing from heaven as kingdom, with all the transformation of the fabric of the world that this is going to involve, you too have got to pick up a Roman cross, the tool of Roman torture, public torture of people to empty them of any resolve of offering resistance to Roman dominance. This, Jesus says, is the price of nonconformity and the burden that is to be carried if these disciples of his that are now confessing him as the Messiah are to go through with their discipleship and to follow him. It's a haunting word. I hope it haunts you. It haunts me. I'm not sure that I've come to grips with what it entails. And we need all kinds of analogs in our day to try to unpack what it might mean. There's a lot of good literature about what the cross means, but we'll be thinking about that this week together. What it means to carry a cross, what it means to be church together. And of course, from this point forward, this is the direction that the narrative is taking, moving towards Jerusalem. But at each stage of the way, Jesus having interaction in the narrative with his struggling disciples, and especially the 12 apostles. And despite all of their difficulties, we hear in chapter 19 that Jesus is preparing them to be 12 judges, 12 rulers who will sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. This includes Judas. Go figure. So Jesus is inaugurating a strange government. He embodies a strange politics, but it's not a politics that is aloof from the power struggles of the world, because this is precisely the journey that leads to his getting himself killed in open shame before the crowds that have come to Jerusalem for Passover, handed over by the authorities of his own people to the occupying power and tortured in public to death. So Jesus's politics is not innocent. It is implicated in the power struggles of the world, because the powers that be are threatened by Jesus to the point that they attempt to empty him of power through this means of execution. So that's the direction we're going. It's going to be some powerful storytelling by Matthew that we'll be interpreting together, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.